Hi, my name's David Kelsey, and this is a lecture on argument. This is a kind of preliminary, basic lecture that gives the understanding, the basic understanding of what an argument is in a philosophy course, right? The first thing to understand is by argument, we really don't mean, sort of like a fight or a disagreement you have with someone, right? And you don't even have to have a kind of verbal disagreement in that sense to have an argument in the sense that we're going to be discussing today. An argument instead is a position that you take, a conclusion, a claim that you're stating backed up by a reason, right? And you don't even have to have two people to make one. In fact, you can just, make one by asserting some kind of claim and then backing it up with a reason. So I don't really have to have anybody else to make an argument. I can just make one on my own. For example, I might argue that I don't know, Toyotas are better than, Nissans because they have a better service record, right? Or I might argue that, something like one coffee is better than another coffee because it tastes better, right? Something that simple. So I don't really have to have somebody else to disagree with to make an argument at all. I can just make an argument on my own by supporting a claim with a reason. Okay, so we're going to then discuss here a little bit more in detail what arguments are, and we're going to state straight away that an argument is a position supported by a reason for its truth. Okay, and so to understand this kind of idea, the first thing you've got to understand is what a position is. So we're going to say first that a position is a stance or a stand on an issue. Right? An issue, we'll say then, is a kind of question that can be answered only yes or no. It's one of those questions that you can only answer one way or the other, And so the position is related to the issue in the sense that the position answers the question that the issue poses, right? Okay, so for example, I have a kind of controversial one here, right? Consider the issue of whether marijuana should be legalized for recreational use in this country, right? It's kind of a hot topic these days, right? And so the issue is the question phrased here that can be answered yes or no, right? So I could take and answer that question as yes, it should be legalized, or no, it shouldn't, right? Those are the two possible positions that I could take, right? Now, say, for example, that I take the position that it shouldn't be legalized for recreational use. Okay, so that's my position. Now, to give an argument, what I have to do is back that position up with a reason in its favor. Right? So something that supports the truth of the claim that marijuana shouldn't be legalized for recreational use. There's a number of reasons why you might support that position. I'll just give one. So it's actually there's scientific evidence that backs up this kind of correlation between prolonged use of marijuana and psychological disorders like depression. Right? There's actually scientific evidence to back that correlation up, and so it's likely that if you use it too much, then you'll develop one of these disorders, which is bad, right? And so that we have here just a reason, a piece of evidence that's supporting that position that we shouldn't legalize marijuana. Okay, and so that's what we would call an argument then. You give a reason in favor of a position, you have an argument. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just present a few different examples to help you see more clearly what an argument is. Again, it's a position supported by a reason, right? So the first one I'll give is I remember when I was an undergrad in college, I took a kind of fun course in astronomy that was called Great Debates in Astronomy. And it was these kind of big questions in astronomy that scientists, astronomers, and physicists had always wondered about. So one of these questions that I think still bugs a lot of people today is the question of whether there could be intelligent life like us out there in the universe, but somewhere besides here, right? Some other place in the universe, another galaxy or another star, another planet, something like that. Now, this isn't the issue of whether that intelligent life has visited this planet, right? Some people actually think that. There's people that believe in UFOs and all of that. This is a separate issue, right? This issue that I'm wondering about here is just whether there could be in the universe, anywhere at all, intelligent life besides on Earth, right? Now, I'm going to take the position here that there is. I'm going to say, yes, there's intelligent life in the universe outside this planet. So that's my position. Yes, right, is my answer to the question of whether there could be such intelligent life in the universe. So I'm going to take the position that there is. Now I'm going to give two reasons to back it up. The first is just that the universe is really, really big, right? It's really, really big. Billions and billions of stars and galaxies and so on, right? Okay, so obviously the bigger the universe is, the more likely it is that there's a planet out there that harbors life and intelligent life, right? Now, the second point the second reason I'm going to give in favor of this position is evolution. Now, here, many people agree with evolutionary theory, right? Evolutionary theory basically says that life will find a way. And of course, that seems to suggest that intelligent life will find a way, right? Now, if you think likely a scientific principle like evolution applies here, my thought is it would be also applicable throughout the universe, right? So it applies here, likely it applies everywhere. Now, if you combine that with the idea that the universe is really big, then that means evolution is working throughout it. So therefore, the chances seem to me, very high that there's intelligent life out there in the universe other than on this planet. So that's my argument there, right? So again, the position is that yes, there's intelligent life in the universe. The reasons are the universe is large and evolution is operating throughout it. So you have your position, you have two reasons in support, you have an argument. The next issue we're going to consider, right, is the idea of the safety belt in a car, right? I remember when I first started driving, we didn't have to wear seatbelts. And there are parts of the world right now where you just don't have to, right? So the question that we're going to ask is whether we should have to wear them, right? Whether it's justified for the government and law to force us to wear a seatbelt, okay? So that's the question. Now, I'm going to take the position, right? I don't actually agree with the position, but I'm going to take it, right? Just to, show you guys how it works, right? The argument process. So I'm going to take the position that no, it's not justified, right? And again, my position then is that the safety belt law is not justified. To make an argument, what I have to do is back that position up with the reason. So my reason then is going to be that each of us, just in virtue of being a person, just in virtue of being a human being, an intelligent being, has a right to do what we want with our body, right? So for example, I could get a tattoo if I wanted, right? Something like that. So likewise then, we might argue that that right applies to our choice, right? It should grant us the choice of whether or not we want to wear a seatbelt, right? Okay, so my position here is quite simply that the seatbelt law is not just. My reason to back it is that we have the right to do what we want with our body. So therefore, we should have the choice of whether or not to wear a seatbelt. Now, really quickly, it's really easy to see that somebody else might disagree with me on that one, right? Because, for example, somebody might take a different argument, and that's all it is, it's a different argument, but they might argue, for example, that the safety belt law is just. Why is the safety belt law just? Because it's for our own good, right? It's for our safety, right? And so that would be a different argument in favor of the other side here of the issue, the other position that the safety belt law is in fact just, right? Okay, so we can do that. We can make arguments on either side, and that's a good exercise as well, to go in and try, right? Okay. The last issue that we're going to consider is the idea of these computers that we have, right? And which types of computer are better? Which types of computers are better? So we're going to ask the simple question of whether a PC is better than a Mac computer. Now, I'm going to take the position, I'm going to take a stand on this issue that Macs are in fact better than PCs, right? And the support for the reasons that I'm going to give in favor of that position are two, right? I'm going to say, one, Macs are better than PCs because, one, they're easier to use. I think they're easier to use. Okay, so that's reason one. Reason two, Macs don't have viruses, or very little, compared to PCs, right? It's a lot easier to catch a virus on a PC computer rather than a Mac, right? So here it's really a simple one, I think. The position I'm taking is that Macs are better than PCs. I've got two reasons. One, Macs are easier to use, and two, Macs don't really have viruses. Now again, you may disagree, or somebody might disagree with my argument, maybe one of my reasons, but that's a different argument that person can make, right? I've just made this one for you. Now, the last couple slides we have in the lecture here are more to do with, kind of bits and pieces, more details about what arguments are, or how to see arguments, recognize them. So the first thing that we're going to say is that, in the last bit of the lecture, we defined the position, right, as the stance on the issue. Well, we're going to also say that we can call a position, we can call it as a conclusion, right? So arguments have conclusions. The conclusion of an argument is just the position you take. It's the claim you're trying to support, right? And then secondly, what we have, the second part of the argument we have are called premises. And the premises are the reasons you give to support that conclusion. They're the evidence, the pieces of evidence that you give to support that conclusion. So every argument will have a conclusion and premises to back it up, okay? The last slide we'll look at for today in this lecture is about how to recognize arguments. And so one of the most important things to do when trying to recognize an argument, because it is sometimes difficult to see the argument that's being given. One of the easiest things to do to help you spot the pieces of an argument are to look for premise and conclusion indicator words and phrases. So these are kind of like indicators of an argument, right? So for example, if I said, therefore, therefore McDonald's is great, right? That therefore is a conclusion indicator phrase. So the idea is that kind of hints to us that the conclusion of an argument is coming, right? So some of the other conclusion indicators that you might see are in conclusion, or therefore, or thus, or hence, right? Those kind of ideas there. A premise indicator will indicate to you that a premise is coming, right? Here's a reason, it will essentially say. So some famous ones are because and since. For example is a good one, right? So here's an example I'll give. My car just broke down, so I need to take it in for repairs, right? Can you spot the indicator word there? The indicator word is in fact so, okay? So is a conclusion indicator. So what it actually does in this sentence here is it tells us that I need to take the car in for repairs is the kind of conclusion of our argument, right? And in fact, we can then see that my car just broke down is the reason for that conclusion. So, okay, so when you're aiming to try to find arguments, use these kind of highlights, these indicators, these signposts, right? Look for them. They're easy ways to spot the arguments. So, okay, well, that'll do it for our lesson on argument today. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.